Hi,
Hi.
welcome back. Recently, a game called Black Beacon came out on mobile, and for PC players, it came out on the Google Play Games PC beta. The launch for this game was a catastrophic failure with many issues. It's not to say that the game will EOS soon because it most likely won't, but compared to what this game would have had if it had a smoother launch, the rough start definitely set it back a lot. We all know that first impressions matter, and that the first thing you notice about someone or something is going to be one of the main things you associate with that someone or something, and for gacha games, or just any game in general, honestly, this is no different. What happens on launch day does not stay on launch day. In this video, I present to you the top 5 gacha games with disastrous issues on launch that might still affect them to this day. Before we start though, you should like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this in the future, and join the Expression Discord server for a fun and lovely community to hang out with, participate in numerous giveaways, and to see pictures of my cat every single day. Now let's get on to it. Now, it's natural for every single gacha game to receive both a lot of love and a lot of hate when it first comes out. There are players who are simply shills to whatever IP or company the game represents, and there are others who are the opposite. It's also natural for every gacha game to sift through players, and for everyone who thought they were interested but actually found out they weren't when they tried out the game, to quit the game after a few hours. However, most times, the drop in players right after launch usually isn't detrimental, but in the cases we're looking at today, the amount of outrage that these launch failures generated impacted the course of these games for better or for worse, and they ended up as what they are today. Most of these games probably aren't going to EOS from any of their launch failures. In fact, some of them are actually better off because of these failures and the insane amount of rage it generated. And as a final note before we get on to the list, just because I said your favorite game had a bad launch doesn't mean you have to tell me to kill myself, so calm down, brew some tea or some coffee preferably, and now let's get on with the list, which will actually be in order from least horrendous launch to the most. Coming in at number 5, the game with the least launch problems because of how much budget the company actually had when making it, Zenless Zone Zero. There's really only one big issue with ZZZ when it first came out. Almost any other issue someone would mention is very nitpicky. There were barely any optimization issues, running perfectly even on my laptop, without crashing and with nothing affecting the servers. If it wasn't for this one pretty big issue that we're going to be talking about, Zenless Zone Zero would have had a nearly perfect and flawless launch. You may have already guessed what I'm hinting at, it's the TV puzzles. If there's one thing players hate when playing a game, and especially a gacha game, is when you force them to do something dumb that stops them from looking at their favorite waifu while playing the game and using her to kill everything, and especially in a game like ZZZ. The TV puzzles ruined pacing, were way too slow to complete even with the little speed up mode that they thought would fix the issue, and while they were lower accurate, nobody enjoyed doing them. I'm 100% sure they implemented the TV puzzles to reduce production costs, because it's a way simpler way to tell a story rather than cutscenes and manga panels, but the way lower cost way ended up being exactly that, a way lower cost way that nobody liked. People were complaining left and right about the TV puzzles, and in turn, they also found other things to complain about the game too, like the endless left-click spam that is the combat and oversaturation of child characters. TV puzzles ended up being removed in later stories, which is definitely the best thing Hoyo has ever done to any of their games. I believe that ZZZ would not be in the top 20 gacha games on Sensor Tower if they didn't remove them, but it still killed hype for the game for a lot of players, which includes myself. Although it's definitely not the most disastrous launch, and as I said, without the TV puzzles the launch for this game would have been flawless. Every other game on the list though was developed with way less initial budget than ZZZ because they're not made by a multi-billion-dollar company, so let's just continue with number 4, Fate Grand Order. Some of you may be surprised to hear that this game has a terrible launch, especially when it's so successful. It first came out in Japan in 2015, and from what it looks like, the game was literally supposed to just be a cash grab from the Japanese audience, capitalizing on the Fate IP. But players actually ended up liking it so much, they scrambled to fix all of their launch issues. It's kinda confusing, this game had so many detrimental issues on launch, yet players were still so obsessed with it. It proves that gacha players really do have a love-hate relationship with gacha games, or maybe they were too obsessed with Saber or something, I don't know. So what issues did this game have? Let's list them off. Credit to Fleur for all this information by the way, thank you Big Man, go subscribe. This game was supposed to be a cash grab from the JP audience, which means they made pulls very expensive. 3 temples cost $80, which is ridiculous. The rates were also bad and there wasn't a pity system, you really just had to spend as much money as possible and then pray to whatever god you pray to that you're gonna get something. Gacha games with bad rates but also no pity are really something else, aren't they? They wanted to take advantage of those who only had a lot of money to spend, I guess. Sad thing is, some of those people probably had no money and then still spent it anyway. Other than that though, character sprites and animations were terrible, some items like grails did absolutely nothing, which I don't know what that means honestly, and unit balance was all over the place. Finally, the UI looked and ran like shit. FGO has definitely improved a lot over the years, and when it launched in NA in 2017, NA players faced almost none of these issues, which was definitely great for the game overall. It's topping the charts these days, which is great to see, but a lot of people won't forget what happened on launch day. Next up at number 3, we have one of the most successful gacha games of today, with one of the most loyal player bases led by none other than Saint Tantas, Wuthering Waves. I should be careful here, the Wuwa community has a lot of trauma from the Hoyoshil community, so if I hate too much, I might get attacked, possibly even by Saint himself. However, the launch for this game definitely doesn't help their case, no matter how actually amazing the game is today. One of the biggest things fueling the Hoyoshil ammunition against Wuthering Waves is the horrific issues that happened during Wuwa's launch. But even other than Hoyoshils, a ton of players were completely put off by all these problems. Let's start from the very top. The biggest issues were all the optimization issues, with many players like myself experiencing horrible FPS lags and crashing many times. Wuthering Frames is not a meme. When the game first launched, you'd have a better chance of getting a 5-star unit in FGO's launch day banner system than running Wuthering Waves at anything more than 30 FPS if you had a lower to mid-range PC. I myself was running at less than 15. FPS optimizations and tons of crashes are one thing though, with the story also having a ton of issues, the biggest of which being the localization, with a lot of text being cut off and voice acting being really bad.
Now I should have access to the database. You're not going anywhere.
I mean, you could have hired me as a voice actor and I promise you I probably would have done a better job. Although, all credit to Wuthering Waves, all these issues are fixed and they even stopped forcing their voice actors to adopt American accents and the English voice experience became a lot better. Now, we have Scottish anime characters.
We promise, we deliver. Lolo Logistics is at your service.
Wuthering Frames is definitely still real on lower end PCs, including my laptop, but it got a lot better and it wouldn't have if it wasn't for all the players' outrage. Complain people, it'll get you what you want, unless you're playing a Hoyo game. Although, on the topic of Hoyo games, Wuthering Waves is made by a much smaller company than something like Genshin Impact, and the standard that people held Wuthering Waves to was something like Genshin Impact. All these issues caught people completely off guard, and in turn, some people were completely turned off by that. Genshin had basically zero issues on launch if I remember correctly, but don't quote me on that, and at the very least in comparison to Wuthering Waves, it's nowhere near as catastrophic a launch, so players were very disappointed. Although, nothing will match my disappointment for the next game, because at number 2, we have the same game that I mentioned in the intro of this video, Black Beacon. I've been trying to log into Black Beacon and play it properly, without FPS and lag issues, after trying to log into it for like 3 days straight, and the fact that I can't play it properly means that I miss out on this character. You've gotta be kidding me. This genuinely makes me bad, by the way. This is probably the hottest character in a gacha game, and I'm missing out right now because the launch for this game has failed so miserably. When I saw the livestream for the game, I was pretty hyped, especially because it looked like it had a cool looking story, cool visuals, cool character design, very hot character design in fact, but as soon as I tried booting it up, I got this message. The game had capped out on Google Play account signups, which means probably more than half the people who wanted to play this game just couldn't. This teeny tiny problem that should have been fixed less than like 3 hours after it was found took 2 or 3 days to fix, which means everybody who was going to play this game but couldn't probably entirely forgot about it, including me. That clip that I showed you earlier was 2 days ago, and yesterday I was finally able to log into the game. However, when I did log into the game, I found it to be also a completely unoptimized mess. I didn't crash or anything, but it also ran at less than 0.1 FPS. It was terrible. Not only was the game lagging, but it also lagged out my entire laptop. I feel deeply saddened because I'm still genuinely butthurt I can't play this character. Other than optimization and people literally not being able to make accounts for this game, their shop system also didn't work. This person on Twitter, Sarah, was scammed out of $5 and warned other players of trying out the shop system. Now look, some companies make gacha cash grabs, but at least their shop systems give the players what they bought. Having a completely broken shop system that just takes your money and gives you nothing is one of the worst things a gacha game can mess up, and especially on launch day when a ton of people are going to be looking to spend money, especially for this character, which I probably would have done. The game being completely unplayable for so many people is what earned it the number 2 place. However, the number 1 place is reserved for a game that was completely unplayable for almost everyone because of an even bigger number of issues. So coming in at number 1 with what is possibly the worst gacha game launch in history that I'm aware of, aside from that one game that launched in EOS in the same tweet, but that doesn't technically count, Tower of Fantasy. If I can summarize the launch of Tower of Fantasy and then every subsequent update they've ever done to the game in 2 words, it'd be shit's f***ed. I've never seen a development team make a more unoptimized, hackable, buggy mess of a game until now. I would honestly say it's worse than Cyberpunk. Maybe. If you didn't have a mid to high-end PC at the time the game came out, you weren't able to play it. The vast majority of people who own laptops or low-end PCs, including me, as well as most mobile players and even PS4 players, experienced insanely bad FPS and tons of crashes, completely preventing them from playing the game. I couldn't even get past the loading screen and was booted out for being too poor. Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail, and even Wuthering Waves all look better than Tower of Fantasy, and they all ran, somewhat, on my laptop. Tower of Fantasy is the worst example of optimization I've personally ever seen. Other than optimization, anyone who was able to get into the game because they had more expensive devices also weren't able to play because the game had an insane amount of hackers that filled every single server that ruined the experience for everyone. If you're the type of person to think, well, that's the hackers' fault, not the devs, you would be incredibly naive because a good development team would not have such terrible security measurements protecting their servers. Tower of Fantasy definitely had a solid foundation for a great game, but their horrible excuse for a launch and their consistently bad updates that have lackluster gameplay and story content, and also barely any fixes to any optimization and hacker issues, mean that the game is a mess. From what I hear, there's also a ton of power creep. I have no prediction to when the game will EOS, but since it's an MMO and those games usually have insanely dedicated players, I would imagine it still has a good 5 years left in it, unfortunately. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to share your experience of terrible gacha game launch days in the comments below, including but not limited to all the games that I mentioned in this video. Make sure to also like and subscribe for more content like this in the future, and join the Express Road Discord server for a fun and lovely community to hang out with, and for pictures of my cats. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you next time.